Okay, here we go. Hi, it's Norman Kochnick here on Eyes on Cricket with Norman Kochnick. I'm here once again with Chris Vernon wearing a hat that I've already forgotten what team it is. What team is it, Chris?
It's my current club in England. It's Sevenoaks Vine, who I'm sure a few viewers might have heard of.
Hang on, 7H5, did you say?
Sevenoaks Vine. So they're one of the oldest and most prestigious sort of clubs in England, I guess. Steve Smith's played for them. They've had a few famous faces over the years. Shan Masood played there. And there's a few very famous English sort of faces as well who have represented as well.
So I have already forgotten. Sevenoaks what?
Vine, V-I-N-E, Sevenoaks Vine.
Sevenoaks Vine. Okay, I'm going to have to Google that one. I've not heard that before. It's news to me. Guys out there, viewers, have you heard of Sevenoaks Vine? Well, I haven't, but Chris is saying it's one of the oldest clubs. We'll certainly find out. I'll be the old, considering how old Chris is, being very old may not be that old. So we'll wait and see where there's an actual real detail there. All right. So as you all know, I'm doing a series of the actual, the so-called movements between IPL clubs, such as the retentions and the so-called releasing of players, and a lot of the thoughts about who they'd like to, not so much retain, but also be able to obtain from the upcoming mini IPL auction, which will be on the 18th of February, which we'll be involved with. So I brought Chris on. I've done one episode already. You guys would have seen the one on the Chennai Super Kings and the ins and outs and potential players there. We're going on to, this is the second episode of that now, so it will be an Aussie and a Pond that we'll talk about in there, in this particular case IPL, but it'll also be the second episode of the one that we're doing regarding the so-called movements in the IPL, where now today's date is the, it'll be only the 4th or 5th that we'll be actually releasing this, and it'll be in preparation for the 18th. So I hope you enjoy this. So today's team, we've decided, we've done Chennai Super Kings. We're now moving on to the Delhi Capitals. Now, the relationship to Delhi Daredevils is something that we haven't quite went through, but Delhi Capitals is the team. And as far as I'm quickly aware that I'm looking at it, they actually were, as you know, the runners-up in last year's IPL 2020 against Mumbai Indians. And they were certainly in the last edition, so they were led by Shreyas Iyer. The Capitals could not clearly get over that final hurdle yet. In fact, the Delhi Capitals, which is effectively the Delhi Daredevils, have not won an IPL league yet, which is unfortunate, but they went very close. Maybe it's this year. All right, we might just hand over to Chris now to go through the players in the squad that's been retained and also the ones that have been released and beyond any slots remaining, and obviously who they might be chasing. Over to you, Chris.
Yeah, so it seems that Delhi have retained quite a large portion of their squad. Just I know that of the budgets available, they've got the lowest purse remaining, which, obviously they've got a few big superstars that they're paying well, but it also means that they're going to have to be fairly selective, I think, in the auction coming up. And I would assume that they've targeted, or they've got probably a couple of slots that they're going to go quite hard for. But we can discuss who they might go for in the auction a bit. I think looking at them last year, that they were pretty strong. I think that a couple of the pundits, I know Kevin Peterson certainly did early on, said that he tipped them to win it. Having watched quite a bit of the tournament, I think they were just weaker. I think the bowling let them down a little bit. I mean, I could be wrong there. I know that Rabada took a lot of wickets for them, but I think that they probably needed another sort of strike bowler in there. The other South African they had was obviously Anrik Nortje as well. Nortje, sorry. But they might look to add the bowling. However, I think that the batting obviously is, the IPL teams are, the depth of talent is so vast at the moment that all sides have most bases covered, apart from maybe the Royal Challengers, who we'll get on to another time, who often seem bowling light. But so Delhi Capitals obviously have your favourite player at the moment, and subject to a lot of your videos, Rishabh Pant as keeper. But they've obviously got other big Indian superstars, Shreyas Iyer, Ajinkya Rahane.
Go through the whole side.
Okay, so the squad at the moment retained Shreyas Iyer as captain. And then there's Ajinkya Rahane, veteran Amit Mishra, who seems to be Yeah, never aging. Avesh Khan, Aksa Patel, who we've spoken about in view with the upcoming England-India series. Ishant
Well, he looks pretty
Sharma.
much. It looks like Axar Patel, Washington Sundar, and potentially Pandya are fighting for one test spot. That's another aspect which is interesting.
It seems interesting that the talk in the paper here or in the podcasts and the pundits seem to suggest that there might be a little bit of grass left on it, so they might go with the extra seamer.
Right.
Which, I mean,
why would they have done that?
Well, I think that they're obviously playing to their strengths, and there's a lot of stats, and I read some articles yesterday that the last 3 or 4 years, India's seamers averages and strike rates are phenomenal. They're Sharma, Yadav, Bumrah all average under sort of 23, 24 at the moment in the last 2 or 3 years, which is incredible, really. But I can't help but think that it will benefit England playing on seaming wickets. I'm not saying that it will allow them to win, but it's a lot more conditions that they're used to at home, if that makes sense. So it would be interesting to see if that's the way they go. But we can talk about that another time.
Yeah, well, we certainly will be, because tomorrow's episode, effectively on the eve of the test, will be all about this. So we'll talk about that shortly. Okay, so you've gone through Amit Mishra, Avesh Khan, Aksa Patel. Go on, keep going.
Ishant Sharma, Kagiso Rabada, to get the pronunciation right. Obviously, South African's premier fast bowler at the moment. Prithvi Shaw, Ravi Ashwin, Rishabh Pant, Shikhar Dhawan, Lalit Yadav. Then the Australian Marcus Stoinis, Shimron Hetmeyer, Anrik Nortje, Pravin Dubey, and Chris Wokes. Good to see an Englishman in there. So that's the squad that they retained.
Now, Anrik Nortje, I think that's the way you pronounce it.
Yeah.
No, doesn't matter. Yeah. All right. So they've got Chris Wokes. You should be happy they've got an Englishman there.
Absolutely. I think that's a pretty good coup for Chris Wokes, to be fair. I think that's for a guy that's, certainly a feature in our one day in 2020 sides, but has struggled sort of playing in the test match role just because of his performance overseas. I think that's a massively good thing for him to be able to be retained. I think it shows how much he's valued as a cricketer. I think he's an underrated cricketer, especially by the press over here. And for a squad like the Delhi Capitals to keep hold of his services is a massive compliment to him. And I think it's because he's a genuine all-rounder. He's got a test match 100 against India, I think it was. I think he got a good 100 against India at Lords. And just shows what his value is, really. So no, fair play to him.
All right, so, okay, that's a pretty strong squad, especially getting the likes of Rabada. I think that's a bit of a coup. But Ishant Sharma is back on deck now, of course. He's fit and ready, may well be playing this test. Okay, so those released, and again, there's this theme of Australian players being released. I've noticed there's quite a few, unless they're jostling around new clubs or new franchises. I'm not sure what's going on. So go through the ones that are released then for me.
So Alex Carey was released. I don't know whether they just see that they only have a certain number of overseas slots. Obviously, I'm as far as they're aware, I'm probably concerned that Rishabh Pant is going to keep wicket and going to be one of their probably 4 or 5 in the order. Maybe they just take a view of Alex Carey that they can use their overseas slot elsewhere. They don't need an overseas keeper to sort of warm the bench, as it were. So unless he plays as a batter only, but there are probably better options out there to play as a frontline batter. So maybe that's the view they've taken there. Chemo Paul released Sandeep Lamashane, who I believe is a spinner. I could be wrong.
Yeah, he is.
He's overseas as well.
Oh, he's actually from Nepal.
Yes. He's a sort of a front of the hand leg spinner, isn't he? Yeah. Tushar Deshpande released. Mohit Sharma released, which he's been a fixture of the IPL for a number of years. Certainly back from what I can remember. Pretty solid, good fast bowler. Not sure. I mean, maybe he's just slightly on the over the hill, as it were. And they've got a pretty decent fast bowling unit there, so maybe that's the reason they've taken there. Jason Roy, a little bit surprised with. The only reason I can think was that maybe he was a little bit out of form, and he was out of form in the summer for England as well. Has had a pretty solid big bash, from what I can see for the Scorchers. And they're possibly saying, well, we're going to target an overseas batter, sort of a more prolific batter, so that frees up that slot there. And then Harshal Patel and Daniel Sams as well, who I believe is a Kiwi. Is that right, Daniel Sams, or is he an Australian?
No. He's not only Australian.
He's an Aussie.
He's also from up the road here in Coogee. He's a Randwick boy. I know him particularly well, and he's a lovely kid. And
Seam bowler,
I
isn't
love, yeah, he's got a good batting capability as well.
he? Yeah.
He's probably fits the all-rounder berth, if you ask me. And Daniel Sams has been fantastic. He's playing pretty well in the, I'm not sure, Thunder. He's playing for Sydney Thunder, actually. Because Randwick Petersham is his local club, which is up the road. It's a Coogee Oval.
Yeah.
And you've got Jason Sang and Daniel Sams, and I think the third player was good old Kawaja, are all from that club. So they're all in the Sydney Thunder outfits, which was interesting. They were in a photo just recently. So, all right. So that's still a very strong squad. And they're saying here slots remaining 8, so they can bid for up to 8 players, correct?
Yeah,
and
with
3 overseas.
3 overseas slots, I think, is what it was about. So it'd be interesting to see what they go with overseas wise. I've read a little bit, and we've touched on him recently, talking about the Big Bash, and it seems that from the articles that I've read is that they are going to target an overseas batter, and Alex Hales seems to be the one that is their tipping to go for. They've obviously not got a huge budget, and Hales, I don't think he's played in the IPL before. He's had a brilliant Big Bash. He's top run scorer in the Big Bash, hit the most sixes as well, I believe. And if he's in any sort of form, I think that he's got to be the one to go for. Him and Darwan at the top of the order would have to be probably the most explosive opening combo in the IPL.
And I mean, Jason Roy has opened with Alex Hales, hasn't he?
Yeah, they would have opened a little bit for England. He seems to still be
intriguing. So one's been replaced by the other. That sounds a little bit intriguing.
I think it might just be a form thing. Jason Roy struggled in last year's IPL. He didn't play a lot and didn't massively score when he did. Didn't really score a run for England when we toured South Africa in the series over here. So maybe they've just looked at it as a form thing. I think that Jason Roy will get picked up by someone, and rightly so, because he's a game changer. But Alex Hales at the moment there's only one reason he's not playing for England, and that's because he's not very well behaved, and has had I think that Owen Morgan, from what probably unsaid, or is that Owen Morgan has probably put his foot down and said, well, I'm captain, he won't play for me. So, which is a shame, because as a talent wise, he's someone that you'd have probably every 2020 side in the world would want him. He's proven he can score big hundreds, and very quickly as well. So I think that an IPL franchise will pick him up, and I think that it fits Delhi's makeup quite well. I mean, him and Darwan, left-hand, right-hand combination, both can score hundreds. I think that would be one of their top targets.
All right, so Alex Hales is one of the people that they could target. There's a few others. Name those.
It depends how they want.
Colin Monroe is one that he's currently playing for the Perth Scorchers here in Australia.
Yeah.
Who are in the playoff tomorrow. They're calling it a challenger game or whatever it's called.
Yeah.
And that's the game between Perth Scorchers and Brisbane Heat, and the winner plays the Sixers on Saturday, which I will cover. What do you think, Colin Monroe? He's an old New Zealander.
Yeah, he's had a good Big Bash, hasn't he? He's scored over 400 runs, I think, at mid-30s average-wise, which is, as a top-order batter, if you're averaging anywhere over sort of 25, I would say is pretty decent in 2020 cricket.
Sure.
I think just to see how the Delhi Capitals view it, they've got a pretty strong, certainly Indian batting core. I guess their only worry is that Pretty Shaw was fairly inconsistent in the second half of the tournament. And I think him and Hales might be two that they look to boost their batting with.
Well, Colin Monroe is also not unlike Daniel Sams' role. Monroe bowls, doesn't he? So
I think he's predominantly a batter, isn't he?
Okay, but he's got a bit of an all-rounder, so that I can remember. But anyway, he might be. Yeah, well, he certainly has been informed. Put it that way. And who else? We've got Josh. English?
Yeah, Josh English. I don't know much about. I know he's an Australian batsman, and he's done pretty well in this year's Big Bash. I think that he will only be an option when you look at the other two, in Monroe and Hales. I think that English will be an option purely if on a budget. They've got the lowest budget remaining. If they're looking for a cheap budget option at the end, then they might go for him. And he also does keep wicket as well, so it could be decent backup to Rishabh Pant or on a rotation thing. But I think that they'll be targeting Hales and Monroe, and just budget-wise might go for English. So.
Makes sense. Okay, we've got a bowler there that I'm certainly going to figure heavily in the Indian team. We've got injured, Umesh Yadav.
Yeah, interesting why, because he was at RCB, wasn't he? I'm unsure why he's been released, to be honest. Certainly RCB over the years, and it's the team that I probably follow the most, just because over the years they've had some of my favourite batters playing for them. You know, they've had Chris Gale, Brendan McCullum, AB de Villiers, Kohli. I've always followed them because they play at a really small ground, and they've got some good batters, so it's always carnage watching them play. But the one thing they've always struggled with was the bowling, and I know they've had, I think Siraj plays for them, and they've had Chalal, but the one thing that's always sort of hamstrung them in terms of winning the IPL, I think, is that their bowling lets them down. It's hard for your batting side to chase 200 every week, so yeah. I'm not sure why they've released him.
But his fitness would be still under a cloud, I would say, even though it's a few weeks off. His fitness would be under a little bit of a cloud, because I think his calf muscle was worse than we first thought. Anyway, he was virtually not in the team since that point. So, yeah, but if he's fit and he's well, it'll be a great pickup.
Yeah, I think he'll just be a decent backup. I don't know whether if he's fit and well, then he's pushing for a first-team spot. Obviously, they've got a lot of good bowling, the Delhi Capitals, and it depends how they want to structure their side with their overseas options. If Rabada and Norkia are going to play, they played all last year pretty much. So there's 2 overseas slots. So they probably want to then keep. Maybe a Chris Wokes will play and have one overseas batter, in a Hales or a Monroe. I think that,
these so-called slots that we're talking about, they're remaining. So that means they can take a further 3 on. You're not going to need to include Rabada, Norjay, and Wokes in that. This is a further 3.
No, what I mean is in terms of their side, they can pick on day one in match one. Right. They can pick. Right. You can have 4 overseas players out of 11. So it just depends how they're going to structure. Yeah, they've got 8 slots remaining to fill in the auction and 3 overseas. So they can pick 3 overseas. As I said, it just depends how do they want to have. Because obviously they've got Shimon Hetmeyer in there as well, who's a pretty decent West Indian. Stoinis is in the squad. He's likely to play. So I would imagine that they'll probably go Rabada, Norkia, Stoinis, and a batter, probably a Hales, would be their 4 overseas, which means that a slot opens up for Yadav potentially if they look at him. Ishant Sharma's injury prone. I think that would be a reasonable thing to sort of say. Yeah. He's had been known to be injured, and obviously you've got the likes of Avesh Khan, who's fairly inexperienced as well. So they might look at Umesh Yadav as a decent backup option to those sort of the Indian core bowlers, if that makes sense.
All right, that sounds good. Well, the last person we'll talk about is the other bowler, this Shivam Dubey.
Yeah, he's. I think he'll be quite a popular. Quite popular in this. As I said, another one that the RCB have released. I'm assuming that RCB have got some good young guys coming through, because he would probably fit the uncapped element of the. I know you have to have a certain number of uncapped players in your squad, I think, from an Indian point of view. So
it's financial. It's clearly financial.
Yeah, I think he'll be quite popular, because I think he'll be quite a cheap option. And yeah, I think that if Stoinis doesn't play every game, then Dubey, they might look at as someone who could replace him as a backup on the all-rounder slot. So, as I'm not don't know too much about him, and he's not played a lot, but I think that he's one of those guys that sort of a similar role to Axar Patel in a way, who, although he's grown in the game and in the squad, Axar Patel, but he sort of started off as can come in and get a quick 20 or bowl a couple of overs if needed. So I think that Dubey might fill that role while he's still finding his feet, if that makes sense.
Okay. Well, that's a good wrap up there, Chris. I think we've done Delhi Capitals well and truly there. So we'll wrap it up for there. That's our episode 2 on the IPL component of our series. And this is specifically about the Delhi Capitals. We'll talk about the next team on the next meeting. This is Norman Kochek with Chris Vernon on Eyes on Cricket. with Norman Kochnick. See you later, Chris. Talk
See you
soon.
later.